What would you do if a little deer kept following you, as if pleading for help? Is it just a coincidence? Or is there a dark secret waiting to be uncovered? Daniel Carter grips the wheel of his patrol car as he drives down the quiet, winding road cutting through the dense forest. The morning air is crisp, but the warmth of the rising sun filters through the thick canopy above. Another day, another uneventful patrol in a town where nothing ever changes. Then he sees it. A small, light brown fawn standing at the edge of the road, staring directly at his car. Daniel slows down, narrowing his eyes. Deer are common in these woods, but something about this one feels different. It isn't moving away. It isn't running. It just stands there, unblinking, as if waiting for something. Daniel exhales, shaking his head, probably just lost. He accelerates slowly, rolling past the deer, but in his side mirror he catches sight of it moving. Not into the woods, not away from the road. It is following him. Daniel frowns. That's unusual. He stops the car, throws it into park, and steps out, the gravel crunching under his boots. The deer stops as well, standing a few feet away, its large dark eyes locked onto him. Are you lost, little one? Daniel asks. The fawn does not move, does not blink, does not even twitch its ears. It just watches him, its expression unreadable, yet filled with something unsettling. A silent plea. Daniel sighs. He steps forward, watching for any signs of fear, expecting it to bolt at any moment. But instead, it takes a step toward him. Now that's odd. He glances around. No sign of a mother. No sign of a herd. Just this one fawn all alone. All right, kid. What's your deal? He takes another step forward. The deer stays put. Then he turns and begins walking toward his car. The deer follows. Daniel stops. It stops. He moves. It moves. Something about this isn't right. When Daniel kneels down for a closer look, what he discovers sends chills down his spine. The deer's fur is stained with dried blood. Daniel crouches, studying the small creature. Up close, he notices something he hadn't before. A dark stain on its fur, barely noticeable against the soft brown coat. His stomach tightens. He reaches out, hesitates, then brushes his fingers over the patch. It's blood, dried, matted into the fur. And it's not the fawn's. Daniel's training kicks in, his mind analyzing the situation. An injured animal? No, the deer isn't limping, isn't in pain. That means only one thing. The blood belongs to something else. A crime has happened here. He stands up, scanning the trees, the undergrowth, the shadows between the trunks. The forest is silent. Too silent. He's been a cop long enough to recognize when something is wrong. And right now, everything about this scene is screaming at him to pay attention. Daniel exhales, his grip tightening around the radio on his belt. He doesn't call it in yet. Not until he knows what he's dealing with. He looks down at the deer. All right, little one. Lead the way. The deer turns and walks into the woods. Daniel follows. The fawn isn't following Daniel for no reason. It's leading him to a haunting scene. The forest grows darker as Daniel moves deeper inside. The air is thick, the scent of damp earth clinging to every breath. He follows the fawn as it weaves through the trees, his boots crunching softly on the fallen leaves. Then the deer stops. Daniel steps forward, his eyes scanning the ground. And then he sees it. A dead doe lies among the foliage, her body twisted unnaturally, her neck torn open by a deep, jagged wound. Dried blood darkens the fur around the wound. Flies buzz around her lifeless form. Daniel's hands curl into fists. He forces himself to take in the details. The position of the body, the nature of the wound, the surrounding area. Nearby, boot prints press into the damp soil. Not deer hooves, human footprints. A cluster of spent bullet casings gleams among the leaves. And then his eyes land on something even worse. A black leather bag, partially unzipped. Inside, glistening in the dim light, are severed deer antlers. Daniel's jaw tightens. This isn't a hunting accident. This is something else. Something worse. His fingers brush against the grip of his holstered gun as he exhales slowly, pushing down the anger rising in his chest. His mind is racing now, piecing together what he's seeing, trying to make sense of it. Then a voice cuts through the silence. Behind Daniel, a chilling voice speaks. "Don't you have better things to do, black cop?" Daniel turns, his body tensing. For men stand behind him, their faces shadowed by the trees. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man, holds a sniper rifle, the barrel pointed slightly downward, but the threat is clear. On his sleeve, a familiar emblem, an extremist symbol. Daniel's heart pounds, but his face remains unreadable. His fingers flex near his holster, but he doesn't reach for his weapon. Not yet. The leader steps forward, smirking. "You're a long way from your usual beat." Daniel doesn't move, doesn't respond. He just watches. The man tilts his head, glancing past Daniel to the dead doe. His smirk widens. Shame about that one. Wrong place, wrong time. Daniel clenches his jaw. The man's expression hardens. "Walk away, now, before you regret it." Daniel glances at the deer standing by his side. The fawn doesn't move. It doesn't run. It just stands there, eyes locked onto him, waiting. Daniel exhales. "Yeah, that's not gonna happen." The smirk vanishes. The men step forward. Daniel reaches for his gun. The standoff begins. Daniel is surrounded. How will he survive against men who have no fear of killing? The forest is still, but the tension is sharp. Daniel grips his gun. His eyes locked on the four men in front of him. The leader, the one with the sniper rifle, takes a slow step forward. His boots press into the damp soil. His men follow, hands resting on their weapons. Daniel doesn't move. "Walk away. Last warning." His voice is steady, but inside, his thoughts are running. For men, armed, no backup. He is outnumbered. The radio on his belt is within reach, but he knows calling for help will take too long. He needs to buy time. He needs an opening. The leader chuckles. "You don't get it, do you? This is our land. Our rules. You shouldn't be here." Daniel keeps his stance firm. His grip tightens on his pistol, but he doesn't raise it yet. The wrong move could turn this into a firefight he won't win. One of the men steps closer, his hand reaching for something behind his back. A knife. Daniel reacts instantly. His gun is up before the man can draw his weapon. "Don't." The air thickens. The man freezes, eyes narrowing. The leader smirks, tilting his head. "You really think you're walking out of here alive?" Daniel doesn't answer. Then the leader moves. Daniel is attacked, and a desperate chase through the forest begins. The leader yanks up his rifle. Daniel drops low as the first shot fires, the bullet cutting through the air above his head. He rolls behind a tree as another shot blasts bark from the trunk beside him. His ears ring. "Move, now." He pushes off the ground and sprints deeper into the forest. Behind him, shouts rise as the men spread out. Heavy boots pound against the earth. Leaves rustle. Branches snap. Daniel weaves between trees, his breath controlled. The forest is dense, giving him cover, but it works both ways. He risks a glance over his shoulder. Shadows move between the trees, gaining on him. Another shot. He ducks as the bullet strikes a tree inches from his head. His feet dig into the soil as he pivots, changing direction. The undergrowth slows him down. He pushes forward. The radio. His hand moves to his belt, fingers fumbling for the device. He presses the button. Officer down. Need immediate backup. Armed suspects in the western sector of the forest. Static. Then a voice. Copy that. Hold your position. Units en route. Hold his position. Not an option. A sharp whistle cuts through the trees. The leader's signal. The men are closing in. Daniel's muscles burn. His lungs pull in sharp breaths. He keeps moving, but the forest is turning against him. The trees grow thicker. The ground slopes downward. Then, his foot catches. The earth disappears beneath him. Just when all seems lost, the sound of sirens cuts through the trees. Daniel's body slams into the dirt. Pain shoots through his side, but he grits his teeth and pushes up. His vision blurs for a second before sharpening. Footsteps are closing in. The leader's voice carries through the trees. Find him. Now. Daniel forces himself to move, but his leg protests. A sharp sting spreads through his calf. Cut. He must have hit a rock. Not deep, but enough to slow him down. Then something moves ahead. The fawn. It stands between the trees, watching him. The small body is tense, ears flicking. Then it turns and darts off. Daniel hesitates. Then he follows. The fawn moves fast, but not too fast. As if leading him again. Shouts echo behind him. The men are still coming. But then, a sound cuts through the forest. A sharp wail. Sirens. Daniel stumbles to a stop. The noise grows louder. The men behind him shout again. But this time, there's urgency. A new kind of panic. Flashing red and blue lights cut through the trees. Backup has arrived. In the poacher's laptop, Daniel uncovers a list of corrupt cops, including his own superior. The men scatter. Some dive into the forest trying to escape. Others freeze as the voices of officers ring out. Drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them. Daniel exhales, his chest rising and falling. He turns just in time to see the leader being forced to the ground, his rifle kicked away. The smirk is gone from his face. His eyes burn with anger. Daniel walks forward, pulling out his cuffs. You were saying something about this being your land? The leader glares but says nothing. Daniel clicks the cuffs into place and stands. Officers move through the trees, securing the area. One of them approaches Daniel, holding a black laptop. Found this in their camp. Might want to take a look. Daniel takes the device. He opens it, fingers moving over the keyboard. Files fill the screen. Transaction records. Names. Receipts. And then, a list. Daniel's stomach tightens. These aren't just hunters. This is a smuggling ring. And the names on this list. His eyes freeze on one in particular. A name he knows well. His superior officer. Daniel clenches his jaw. The pieces are falling into place now. This wasn't just about illegal hunting. This was bigger. This was protected. And now he has the proof. He looks up. The fawn stands at the edge of the trees, watching. Still. Silent. Daniel exhales. Justice is coming. All those involved are brought to light. The police station is crowded. Officers move between desks. Conversations overlap. And the hum of a busy department fills the air. Daniel stands in the center, watching as officers process the captured poachers. The leader sits in a holding cell, his wrists cuffed, his eyes locked onto Daniel. No words are exchanged, but the message is clear. A detective walks up, holding a printed document. The evidence is solid. Your report, the files, the confessions from the lower members of the group. They're done. Daniel nods but doesn't relax. There's still more. He reaches into his pocket, pulling out another file. The names of the corrupt officers glare up at him, the betrayal heavy in his hands. He steps toward the captain's office. The door is slightly open, and inside, his superior officer is pacing. Daniel enters without knocking. The man turns, eyes narrowing. You better have a good reason for barging in. Daniel places the file on the desk. The captain glances at it, then stiffens as he recognizes his own name. Silence fills the room. Then a quiet chuckle. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, Carter. Daniel doesn't flinch. I know exactly what I'm doing. The door opens again. 2 internal affairs officers step in. One of them speaks. Captain Reynolds, you're under investigation. Please step away from your desk. The superior's face darkens, but he knows it's over. He raises his hands slowly as the officers move in. As he's led away, Daniel finally exhales. Justice isn't easy, but today it has been served. As Daniel kneels down to touch the fawn's head, a painful memory resurfaces. The forest is quiet again. The sun filters through the trees, casting long shadows over the earth. The fawn stands a few feet away, watching Daniel with calm, unblinking eyes. He kneels, extending a hand. The fawn doesn't move away this time. The small, delicate frame trembles slightly, but it stays. Daniel exhales. His fingers brush over its head, feeling the soft fur beneath his palm. Something in his chest tightens. A memory resurfaces, one he has buried for years. A small boy sitting alone on the steps of a foster home. His hands curled into fists, his eyes scanning the empty street, waiting for someone who would never come. Lost, abandoned, just like this fawn. Daniel blinks and focuses on the present. You're going to be okay. The fawn lifts its head slightly, ears twitching. Then, as if understanding, it turns and slowly walks back into the trees. Daniel watches until it disappears. Justice is not always immediate, but it is inevitable. Even when you stand alone, the truth will find its way to the surface. Even the smallest, most vulnerable lives can change fate if they find the right person to protect them. This is not the end. There are more stories that will challenge you, inspire you, and make you question the world around you. Click on the next video and continue the journey. Something even more powerful is waiting.